Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Wednesday afternoon here on Kobold Press. It is your resident Kobold Dot and Head-in-Chief Kobold, Wolfgang!
What? Yay! Thank you
Yay!
for having me.
You know, if Wolfgang's on a Kobold Chats, it means big announcements, everybody.
Yes, I do have news. Oh my God, I've got so much news.
So much news.
The spoilers, stuff coming down the pike. It's all Book of Ebon Tides. Just how much can you wring out of me, Dot?
Hey, if that is a challenge, I will accept. And
All right.
Alexander will be yelling at me in chat before it's over with. Well, that's true. So we're here to announce our next big Kickstarter. Which is, our next big book, which is pretty exciting. And I believe, now correct me if I'm wrong, Southlands books just started getting into the hands.
Yes. So the super excitement this week is that the print books for Southlands have hit. And it's not just one. It's 3 books, right? 4. Well,
4.
3 plus an exclusive.
Oh, okay.
That only the Kickstarter people can. But there's the Southlands World Book, the Southlands Player's Guide, the City of Cats with the adventures, and the City Book. And then that Tales Beneath the Sands print exclusive that was for backers only. Yes.
Yeah. So past Kickstarter coming to fruition. It's almost been a year since I've been doing this, and I feel like we were in the middle of Southlands right when I started. It's like a full cycle. We've come full cycle, everybody. So you now have Southlands, and we're getting ready to launch this next big book called Book of Ebon Tides. Now, I had you on a few weeks back, I feel like, and we talked a little bit of lore for the Shadow Fae, but there were a lot of things that you could not spoil, and now everybody knows why you couldn't spoil it.
Because the plane of shadows is where we're going. Yes,
exactly.
It's like I've been living Shadow. So, okay, the first thing I got to say about this project is I'm writing about half of it, which is a big chunk.
Okay, so you got your hands like deep in this one.
Deep in this one. And Celeste Konowich is my main co-author, and there's a few other people involved. But most projects at Kobold Press these days, I write some, but this is really kind of my baby, right? Like the Shadow Fae, this whole plane of shadow thing, going back to my obsession with the hints and clues that were dropped around shadow in D&D umpteen years ago, right, in first edition. So I wanted to do this project forever, and I finally said, who's gonna let me do it? Wait, I could just do it.
Yeah. You don't need permission.
I don't need permission. I mean, I don't need to have a seance and call up the ghosts of first edition designers and say, can I mess with shadow concepts? No, I've gone and messed. It's too late.
Yeah, it's too late to ask permission.
Totally is. It totally is. And it's been a year of writing on this, 11 months.
Wow.
It's come a long way with a good group of designers. Some of this stuff, like we talked about a few weeks ago, right? Some of the Shadow Fae lore has been around Kobold Press for years. Courts of the Shadow Fae, has a 4th edition version. That's how long that's been going.
Wow.
Right? And of course, it's got an actual play that we ran for the Courts of the Shadow Fae proper, as you well know.
Yes, proper. Which I can announce as well. It's coming back Monday.
Yes, Monday. Yay!
Monday.
Timing.
Yeah, timing. Perfect timing. See how?
Yes.
I planned that.
It's like we're thinking ahead. What are we doing in October? Well, what about this?
What about a little courtly intrigue?
Yes, but I want to say, Book of Ebon Tides isn't just about the Fae, although that's a huge chunk of it. The thing that makes it bigger is it looks at other parts of the Plane of Shadows, right? And other residents. It's like the Fae are a huge chunk. But we talk about the gnomes, and there's some ghouls out there. And if you look at the world book, right, like the Midgard world book has a chapter on the shadow as Midgard sees it. But Book of Ebon Tides is really it's the plane of shadows next door to whatever setting you want, right? If you say, I want to take the Forgotten Realms and I want a plane of shadows full of fae and ghouls and gnomes and intrigue, you can, right? There's nothing to stop you. You don't have to tie it to Midgard if you don't want to. Though obviously I like it that way.
It's a lot more fun that way.
It's more fun that way. But I get it, right? Many people have their homebrew campaign and they're like, I just want to pull people out of our everyday world into something more shadowy, more dangerous, gloom-ridden, full of deadly intrigue, and that's what Book of Ebon Tides is about. It's a setting book. It's got monsters and character options. It's got, oh my goodness, we can't even spoil all the art and all the races and everything in it. But yes, if you want to play in the Shadow Realm, or if you want to take a party from pretty much any mortal world and put them up against the elite elves and the shadow Darakul and gnomes who are just nasty little buggers. I don't know what it is I have against gnomes, by the way. Every set of gnomes I write are just nasty.
I quite like it, actually, because I love gnomes, right?
They're
I'm a
delightful.
little gnomey at heart. They're so delightful, and I really appreciate the way you twist. Like the Darrow are brilliant.
Yes,
it's a brilliant race to play. I love them.
Those guys are fun. The Nimheim gnomes in Midgard and the shadow gnomes and weird gnomes of the Plane of Shadows are they're less obviously twisted than the Midgard gnomes. They haven't totally sold their souls, but they're not trustworthy. I guess it's the old kobold gnome rivalry coming back once more.
Oh, I see. And we know which side Wolfgang stands on.
Oh yeah, no, I'm with the kobolds. Oddly enough, not a lot of kobolds out on the Plane of Shadow. They're too sensible and practical to go digging around.
Digging too deep. Adam says, my players are terrified of gnomes in Midgard. They should be. They should be. They're tricky little buggers.
They are, and they're usually up to something like, drink this. Or
would you like some candy? Here.
Would you like some candy? Yeah, their tricks aren't always okay. They can be kind of obvious, but not always.
Right. So we're
that's
looking
sort of
at a
the big
setting
picture.
book. You said we're looking at a setting book, and we're looking at new options as well. I'm guessing from the
ton of
art,
new options. Like, yes,
that there's got to be
some cover art.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. Actually, the Midgard World Book version of the Plane of Shadows also talks about bear folk, and bear folk are in this Plane of Shadows. So Book of Ebon Tides has a bear folk section, bear folk variants, bear folk subclasses, bear folk magic. Oh my God, the magic chapter I wrote.
Bear folk.
I know. There's a lot. And a little bit of it is picked up because Celeste did such a great job with bear folk in it was Warlock Zine 23, I'm pretty sure, where she just went to town on, hey, let's give Bearfolk a domain. Hey, let's give them their own patron goddess. Hey, let's give them some cool magical weapons, right?
Love it.
And whenever we have stuff like that in a zine, it doesn't really reach a broad audience. Like the people who subscribe to the Patreon get it, but it's the kind of stuff we liked. Yeah, oh, hint, hint. If you're not on that Patreon for $1 a month, I don't know how much more tempting we can make it, honestly. It's like big, juicy lore dumps, big, crunchy rules. Material that gets playtested in Warlock tends to roll into a hardcover someday, or at least the stuff that meets a certain bar, and Celeste certainly does with her Bearfolk material. So some of that inspired things for the Plane of Shadows, and the Bearfolk are inhabitants. They're the good guys, like when the Shadow Fae and the Shadow Ghouls and the general downhearted nastiness of umbral treachery gets you low, then you go visit the Bearfolk and you have a good time, because they're not evil like that. They're always chewing away at the edges of shadow and are the bright shining star of a moderately dark campaign. Right?
Okay, so that's actually that's an interesting I guess topic, really, is kind of the setting leans towards a darker, kind of more mysterious
Yeah, there's lots of mystery. There's lots of high magic. The spell section is full of fey magic, ghoul magic, doom-ridden stuff. It's I've had a lot of fun in the magic system. The setting, I mean, it's not Dark Sun. It's not going to kill you dead instantly, but it is. It's a step up from, hey, you're wandering around a mortal world where, you know, most things that look edible are edible, and the sun comes up in the morning, and there are many safe refuges. It's like, well, there's some of that in the Plane of Shadows, but there's a whole lot of ancient evils, dark cults, people who mean you ill but smile to your face, right? Like the stuff that comes out of Courts of the Shadow Fae is, yeah, they seem nice, but they're kind of corrupt.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or at least they all have their own agendas. So
well, that was kind of the vibe I always got anyways, of like the Shadow Realm. It's a little twisted.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, so everything's not quite as it seems, and like whatever way that manifests.
Well, illusion is a big part of this. The subclasses and the character options lean toward that. The magic leans toward illusion and trickery. Fey magic is just as it's portrayed in you know, fairy lore or fey lore. It's always sort of sideways. There's 2 whole chunks of magic items that I really want to talk about. But I guess that's next time. We should talk about. We gotta wait for
some things to release before we can spill those beans.
Yeah, well, you know, Vault of Magic's coming, and I think that inspired, hey, let's do a whole lot of interesting Fey magic items. But I was gonna say the opposite of all the nasty, dark, whatever treachery stuff is the shadow goblins kind of come into their own here. We get a lot more about them in Book of Ebon Tides. They're a playable race, for one thing. And they're, yeah, I don't want to say they're the Kender or the Halfling type, but you know what I mean? Like, they're the short people who kind of stir shit up.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they're there to cause mischievousness. Shenanigans.
Yes. Shenanigans. They are in charge of shenanigans, and there's a lot more of them than you really see in Courts of the Shadow Fae, because in Courts of the Shadow Fae, the Shadow Goblins are around.
Yeah.
But the goblins are servants and underlings, and it's fetch me this, and, you know, they're present, but they're not driving the story in any way. It's very much the Shadow Fae are in charge, and you goblins are allowed to be our servants, and if you get some food and shelter out of it, you've done well, dear goblins. You know, don't get above yourselves, small folk. Elsewhere on the Plane of Shadows, there are goblins in charge, right?
Oh, a little different balance.
Yeah, they run their own show, right? And it's not anything like the courts. I don't want to spoil too much goblin culture, but I think you can imagine it's a little more it's chaotic.
Yeah, I was about to say, is there chaos involved?
But yeah, it's chaotic, and the one thing I'll say about it is they have their own brand of magic. It's a sort of lunar magic.
Oh.
And they're really good at it. And they just use it among themselves, just like the bear folk tend toward like druid magic or radiant magic. Protective magic is bear folk magic. Well, goblin magic is chaos and moonlight, and I love it to pieces. So
that's very cool. So I have a soft spot for goblins. I know you're a kobold person, but I'm a bit of a goblin person. I really love my gobs a lot. So I'm very excited for new goblin options.
Yes. Oh, they're a major race in the setting. They get a lot of support as a playable race and with subclasses and their own magic. So there's both lore and rules support for goblins to take them out of that role of just the servants of the Fae and give them a little bit of their own territory, their own ideas. They might not be good ideas, but they're ideas.
How very goblin.
Right?
How very goblin.
Yes. So, and the monster section that, Well, I'll let Celeste talk about that. Is she coming on? Because
She
she wrote
is.
all the
Next
monsters.
week. Oh, she wrote all the monsters. Okay, well then we'll keep monster conversation for
I
Celeste.
mean, I threw monsters into a brainstorm. Like, what if we did this? But she made them real things, right? And yeah, there's a monster section in here. So it's like I say, it's setting with a heaping helping of rules material that will make running a Shadow World expedition, a mini campaign, a one shot, whatever you want to do, stepping outside your normal realm. There it is, without it being like, hey, you got to go to the full on, you know, visit the hells kind of planar
Right.
travel.
Right.
It's way more accessible than that.
So, okay, I'm interested in some of the. So, we've talked a little bit about there's going to be some new magic. I imagine with all
Yes.
the like trickery magic and illusion magic, there's got to be some extra class builds or subclass
Oh, yes.
builds that are being added. Can you nudge those? Because I'm guessing they're like rogue and bard heavy.
There are. And you know, I wrote a lot of the magic stuff, but indeed most of the hero stuff, like the races, the bear folk and other elements, that tended to come from Celeste. And I know I looked at it oh, here it is.
Oh, Wolfgang's diving in, y'all.
I have had this manuscript and these things open for yeah, okay, sometime. um what did we do here? Oh, right, there's a bear folk domain. Oh, yeah. Right. So the one I will kind of talk about is again sort of playing against the shadow. Like, shadow stuff is all gloom and darkness, except when it's not. There's a light weaver sorceress origin that Celeste put together, and they draw their power from sparks of light, right? Because shadow
Right.
isn't just darkness.
Right.
So this is sort of a cosmic balancing class. Hey, here's the
Oh.
bright side. You know, they have all sorts of not just shadow powers, but radiant powers. Um, and they, I don't even want to say all of it, but the thing that I think is the most visual, beautiful thing about the sorceress origin is they have something called a refraction shield, which is basically a cloak made of light, right? And it's a protective. You spend sorcery points, right? And it shields you. And I'm not going to go into all the detail. I'll let Celeste talk about it some more. But it just, I mean, it's a rules mechanic that when I read it, I'm like, oh yeah, I know what that looks like in the art, and I know how I want to present that as an NPC. And I bet somebody wants to play that sorcerer, if they're from the plane of shadows, right? And I'll spoil a name or two. There is a shadow tradition. There's an arcane tradition. And there is a barbarian tradition, which, if you're not playing a bear folk barbarian, I don't know what you're even doing. So yeah, there are things along those lines, and there's actually multiple domains, and there's a little bit of druid, and like we go pretty deep on hero options here. Yeah, so all those spells are local, right? All that magic is meant for this plane. And Book of Ebon Tides makes it possible not just to go visit it, but to be from there. Yep. And that's really what we wanted to enable. Like, yeah, this is something that Kobold Press does with most of its settings. It's like, well, you could go there as an outsider, but often it's more fun to be a native, right?
Yeah.
If you're a shadow goblin, or you're one of the fae, or you're one of the bear folk, you know, your perspective's different.
Yeah.
There's still plenty of adventure. Oh my goodness, there's a lot of adventure. um, but it's a strange land, right? It plays right into the weird fantasy vibe that I love because, the shadow world doesn't work like the regular world. Um, shadow corruption is in the Midgard world book, right? So there's stuff that can turn your character to a darker path or have negative
Ooh.
effects. But if you're a native, you know how to deal with all that, right?
Right, right.
So it's the difference between, well, I'm going to visit, I don't know, the Amazon and I know nothing about the jungle. I'll stumble around and hope I do okay. Versus, I grew up in Brazil. I've been to the jungle. I know what I'm doing here, right? It's that sort of difference that the native characters know what's
Hmm.
dangerous, whereas people coming into the Shadow Realms are expected to stumble around and be idiots a little about,
Right,
you know,
figure
who
it out.
who do you accept food from? There might be consequences, right?
So, I mean, that's actually makes me think like, what is really the connection? Like, how if you wanted to play Courts of the Shadow Fae and you were going to get your hand on Book of
Mm-hmm.
Ebon Tides, what are some options there? Like, how do they cross? Is there any through
Sure.
line?
Oh yeah. I mean, Courts of the Shadow Fae is sort of one of the first places this all showed up, right? And this take on Shadow, this particular version of the lore and the people who live in Shadow. Um, so we're not like throwing all that aside and just making it a completely generic plane hopping book, right?
Mm-hmm.
The the details of the courts of the Shadow Fae are still in the lore.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the NPCs are there. It doesn't assume that you're going from Midgard to visit Shadow. You could be coming, well, frankly, you could be coming from the Hells, or you could be coming from some spell jamming plane, or you could be
Mm-hmm.
coming from, Eberron. It doesn't matter. There are shadows of every world. Um, but the Courts of the Shadowfey material integrates pretty seamlessly um, into the setting book, and of course, we have some adventures that we hope to share here too.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, I didn't work on that book, so I can't tell you very much about it.
That's okay. That
uh,
just gives me another Wednesday to put some money on it and go talk
right?
about it.
Some super talented designers took the material from me and Celeste and then said that's our foundation to tell some stories.
Cool.
Because the thing we didn't want to do with Book of Ebon Tides is just sort of drop it out there with no hooks for how to, like, Courts of the Shadowfey is the classic adventure in the setting, but it starts at 8th level, right?
Right. Yeah. It's no small
so
feat.
so you might assume that maybe some adventures at lower levels are also part of the package,
It seems like
right?
a good guess
Right.
there.
Certainly, if you're starting native characters at first level, you're going to need to start um,
Yeah.
somewhere outside the courts because the courts will get you killed.
Yeah, real
Uh,
fast.
yeah. But the tone is similar, and at the same time, it's a whole campaign setting, right? Courts
Mm-hmm.
is an adventure. And one of the things that inspired this whole project was people kept buying Courts of the Shadowfey saying, it's a great adventure. Where's the rest of the setting? The
I
implied
want more.
setting. Right. And this is exactly that. This is more of that forest, more of those kinds of fae,
Mm-hmm.
more of societies that aren't the fae, but are related or enemies, friends, just down the river kind of places. And yeah, there's all the things that you find in the Shadow Realm chapter of the Midgard World Book get some degree of expansion plus a ton of new stuff. Like the Shadow Goblins don't get a word in the Midgard source material. They just don't exist really, except as servants in Courts of the Shadowfey. So all the goblin material is new and I love it to
I'm so
pieces.
excited, goblins.
Yes.
um,
In fact, the whole book is pretty much new, right? Like I talk
yeah.
about picking up a little here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when we do something like Deep Magic, like we'll pick up half the book and half the book will be new. But for Book of Ebon Tides, I can think of one section where we pick up a map. and some text, and maybe there's a clerical domain we pick up. There isn't much. It's almost all brand new material. Like I said, it integrates well with Courts of the Shadow Fae, but it's not like we're just going to reprint the adventure. That's not what a setting book is.
Right, yeah, totally. We've actually had, this is actually perfect time. I'll go ahead and call for chat if y'all have questions, but we had one come through that I thought was actually a really interesting one, since, we're playing Courts of the Shadow Fae here on the channel, and we're coming back for season 2 because they have just made it to the labyrinth. But one of the most interesting things is the Shadow Road itself, like finding a road into the Shadow Realm. Will there be details about
my goodness,
better explaining that process so it's not quite so secretive?
Right? Like in the adventure, all you need to know is, okay, you find it, you get there.
Right. Here's the ritual,
sort of,
do the steps, spin
do
around
this,
twice.
do that.
Yeah.
Right? And that's for people in the daylight world, right? In the mortal world, to find their way into shadow. It's not that easy to unlock.
Right.
The Shadow Roads, once you're there, it's a whole different thing, right? Like, the Shadow Goblins know where the road is. They probably helped build it, right? The Bear Folk, yeah, right. We know that road. Oh, and by the way, we used our magic to bend it so it would go where we wanted, right? Those kind of things. There's a lot more detail on the Shadow Roads. They're more accessible than getting them from outside the realm, which is meant to be sort of hard.
Right, yeah, no, but they don't want people to come in.
Right. They want to use those roads for their own nefarious purposes.
Right.
But no, it's a really good question. And the Shadow Roads have sort of both a deep lore and some mechanics spun up in chapter 1, which describes the setting in, what's different about this compared to your average human realms-like campaign.
Interesting. Well, I imagine then that there are going to be some pretty beautiful maps.
There are beautiful maps. We can say, oh my goodness. Yes. John Pintar has done some of the city maps, and those have been great. We have a regional map that shows not just the forest where the courts are, but all the other areas in one large sort of, it's stunning. It has details of where all the cities are, where all the other courts are, because of course there's more than one court.
Right, right.
The gnomes have some courts. There are some elves. There are humans. They don't call themselves courts, but the humans have a city. The shadow goblins have some things. The ghouls have a... don't go there. I mean, you could. Yeah. It's full of adventure, but not for the low level. And then there are cities of ghosts and cities of high magic and rivers black as night carrying souls down to the sea, right? So it's all of that.
I'm already getting spoopy vibes for the October setting, which is kind of fun.
Yes, it's a great setting and a great set of character options for sort of a gothic Halloween dark side game.
Woo! I like it. I love it. Amanda Hammond in chat needs to know, are there Shadow Road truckers?
Yes, they have special hats. They're goblins. Technically, they drive carts made of bone. But I call them truckers, sure. We got ourselves a convoy.
I love it.
That would be awesome.
So this is really interesting, right? Because Courts of the Shadow Fae came first. Now, there is some information, as you mentioned, in the Midgard World Book about the Shadow Realm and what could kind of generally be expected of it. But you kind of worked from a campaign out into a world. I'm sure I saw a couple people in chat. They'd love to know, what does creative process look on something like that? Because you're expanding and making up a lot of new things to fit something that's already... just a campaign.
Right. And I didn't want to contradict what was in the Midgard World Book, but at the same time, the creative process here was very much about saying, all right, we don't want this to be just Midgard. We want it to be a nexus where anybody can come to the plane of shadows and use it, right? Which means we keep the parts that the Midgard mortals know, but we bring a whole lot of newness. And for me, that usually starts with cartography, mapping, right?
Okay.
Then there were conversations with Celeste about who are the people. Like we have 12 races in this book, but 5 of them are major character types, and 7 of them are like, they're around. You could play those. They're just not the big movers and shakers, right? They
Right.
don't, they're little smaller or few in number or fading races. There's those are all great, but they're very specific flavors. And so once you know who the people are, you say, what are their societies like? What does the city map look like? And working with some of the concept art has been fun and illuminating, right? What does a goblin city look like? What happens if the Fae just are run riot with high magic, right? Like if it weren't constrained by the limits of magic in the mortal world, what would this town look like? It's like, how do we even map this thing?
Wow. Yeah, for
So
sure.
it's very high fantasy. And some of the creative process has been, back and forth. Some of it was building a solid outline early on. And a lot of it is making choices about what not to include, right? There's a particular tone we're trying to hit here, which is Fae, dark, gothic, humorous, but high magic. Humorous is mostly the goblins, but there's a particular shadow vibe we're trying to bring across, and some races or tropes don't fit that, right? Like it's not a whole lot of clockwork, gear forged, automaton, whatever going on here. That's, it's a more organic, elvish kind of look. There's not a lot of super big, multinational orders of paladins stomping around. There's some of that with the bear folk. Could play a paladin, but it's not like you've got an entire order backing you up, right? And fortresses across the hillside and at every river crossing. It's so dark and dangerous. Yes, still there's some definite points of light. I think points of light was a term they used in the 3rd edition era for a certain campaign style. And this is a little bit like that for those who remember.
So everybody keeps commenting on the beautiful art that is the cover of the Book of Ebon
Tides. That's Marcel Mercado's cover art. He was also the cover artist on Deep Magic and Southlands.
So maybe this is too much spoiler and you can just say no, but are any of these major NPCs or characters from the cover art? Because people are like, I would die for this bear folk. Like, come on.
Right? So when we started the cover sketching process, we knew sort of what we wanted, like in terms of implied story and a little bit of like mode of dress. But Marcel is such a great artist. We didn't want to cramp his style too much. We said we like this and this on the cover, and it's this kind of setting, and come back to us. And he did, I don't know, a dozen sketches, 6 or 10 sketches, something like that, about ways we could approach it. And this was the one that everybody said, yeah, go that way.
Yeah.
And then, as occasionally happens, it was too cool not to write into the book, at least.
Yeah. I mean, come on.
Some of it.
Everybody's right? like, who's the baby? Who's the babe? Yeah, that seems to be an
so
important...
not telling.
Yes, so it is important, everybody. Mark it. It's coming.
Yes, it will show up in for those who are paying attention. I don't think it's not a world-spanning plot point, but if you are paying close attention, you will find stuff like that.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's not a setting that's meant to be... Well, no, I'm going to shut up about that. I'll talk about that later.
Okay. Well, here's another great question. Are we expecting any lair adventures or other warlocks to be released on Patreon leading up to this? Like using some of this?
Yeah. Using some of the sorts of things found here. Well, editor Scott Gable is always pulling cool stuff into the Warlock zine or the Warlock lairs. And he has known for a year that this project is coming. And he's no dummy. So I think he has at least one and maybe two layers that relate to this. But I honestly don't know when they're showing up.
Ooh. So yes, and not sure.
Maybe later, right? Like
yeah.
It could be February, right? Like, or it could be that he's got them in hand. And this is the downside of Kobold Press having many talented people working on things simultaneously. It's like, I don't always know what's going on. I just know he said, yeah, we're going to do something with this and this. I'm like, okay. And I forgot to ask when.
I see. Yeah, Alexander made it clear. The interior pieces of art are just as good. I did have a chance to peek at those, though I can't show you all those until later. But we will. I will over the next few weeks show them off on Kobold Chats. But there are some really beautiful. Like we always do an amazing job with characters. Like the character art is always fantastic. But some of my favorite pieces are always like architectural or landscape pieces.
Yes.
That are just so. And there is one in there. I was just like. I like gasped a little. I clutched my pearls because they were so it was so beautiful.
Right. We haven't done landscape art except for big settings, right? Like we did a couple of pieces like that for Southlands. We did we did a bunch of landscape art in the Midgard World book because I don't know, landscape art gets a really bad rap, right? Like
it does.
Because there's no action or no characters, or it's not as whatever. I'm like,
flashy. It's not as flashy.
It's not as flashy, but done right, I think it really sets the mood. It really says, here is the valley you see before. Here's the glaciers and the giants coming for Fimble. Whatever it is, you can immediately get a sense of, oh, this is what it's all about here. And so, yeah, we commissioned a few of those for Book of Ebon Tides that really nailed it. It was fun going through that. It's like, well, what do the houses look like here? I'm like,
well, that was what actually caught me was the architecture in one of them, because I'm a little bit of an architecture nerd, and architecture says a lot about a society or like a race of people and how they build out their culture and the place in which they kind of like cultivate. And so I just found it was so beautiful and unique in comparison to a lot of the stuff I had seen in other pieces of our work. So
right, like, and that's part of the high fantasy and the fantastical and weird here is that we're, it's not peasant huts and gray stone castles, which are fine, but usually the emphasis isn't on the huts and the gray stone. It's about the big red dragon swooping down in that picture, right? Like that's backdrop, and here the landscape is really defining how you feel about it. So yeah, we hope to commission a few more of those, but I think there's some landscape art. I'll have to ask the art director. There might be some more coming. I'm not sure.
Chat wants a bear trucker warlock scene.
It
needs to happen. We need to, like, who's driving these shadow roads? Yeah, we have to know.
Blow the horn. All right, this is it. I'm putting the challenge out to the Kobold art direction, graphic designer,
we have to have
all
a
those
trucker.
folks. Yeah, we need a hat, like just a bear folk hat. I think would be nice.
Yep.
Just next
I'd
time.
like for it to have actual, like, it's a trucker hat, but it has bear ears on it, like sewn to it.
Oh,
and it just says "Keep trucking."
Yes. Oh my God. We all need to wear these, like, as we drive to Gen Con or drive to PAX Unplugged, right? And we get in our vehicles and get on the road.
Yeah, right. Speaking of, actually, that is perfect segue for a question that just came through chat, which is not about Book of Ebon Tides, but about Kobold Press and you making appearances at a few cons coming up.
Oh, I was just at Gen Con. What more do you want of me, people?
Yeah, we're all still recouping.
Yes.
It's a crazy weekend.
So yes, if you missed me, and Dot, you were there too, and not all the kobolds, but most of the kobolds were at Gen Con. And it was a great party and a good time. I think the next show that people are at is Game Hole, coming up in about 2 or 3 weeks in Madison, Wisconsin, and I will not be there. I couldn't make that work. But then there's PAX Unplugged, I know that the Kobold Press team is going to PAX
I'll be
Unplugged.
there for sure.
Right, you'll be at that one. It's a bigger crew. I think Gamehole is sort of a smaller show. PAX Unplugged is huge. And I am probably not at PAX Unplugged either.
Alexander says he's keeping you quarantined to your cave for writing purposes.
Yeah, this is the downside of like saying I'm going to write half the book. Is now I have to
because you gotta write it.
Well, I'm like one chapter away from done. I can kill it off this weekend. No, really. Oh well, that's not counting stretch goals. I hope to have all the stretch goals for the first 3 goals written before we launch. We'll see. It might not happen. Maybe I'll ask Celeste to write them. That would be okay. Not that she isn't busy. I'm gonna tell her you said that. Oh, she's so busy too. We were just glad to get her on board with this project, and I think it plays to her strengths too. So I'm gonna have to be like in chat when she's on, and I'll quiz her. What did you mean when you wrote on page 39? Why is this art brief like this? I have questions.
All right, chat. Now's your chance as we wind down here towards the end of our Kobold chat for the day. If you got questions, burning questions.
Ooh.
I know. I put the pressure on. Everybody says,
ask me anything.
You best be careful. It is the internet.
Oh yeah, they will. Well, I didn't say I'd answer. Who asked?
That's true.
I'm just gonna say no. I have boundaries. No. Not answering.
So does that mean, I guess that means we'll have Southlands at PAX U.
We will absolutely have hard copies. Probably have Southlands at Gamehole.
Okay.
Because that's it has shipped to backers. People are opening boxes and getting their books.
It's pretty exciting.
I think it won't actually hit store shelves until November, but you might be able, if you didn't back Southlands, you could probably score a copy in Madison at the Kobold booth. I'm pretty sure we're taking some.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Oh, Clayton. Clayton needs to know, are there monks in the Shadow Realm?
All right, so Celeste and I were in agreement about almost everything. But she knows how much I hate monks, so she wrote one anyway.
At least one.
I believe there are monks.
That's
because
cool.
Again, it's if it were Midgard, I would have said, no, there are never monks in Midgard, ever. But it's the world next door to every world. So those monks are from somewhere else. Those are like Dragonlance monks, Realms monks.
I'd be interested to know what some of the subclass stuff, like the builds are for the monks in a place that's so dark, kind of martial combat. Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah, what do key powers look like in? Yeah,
that's very, very cool.
Yeah, I mean, we took it some non-traditional directions. I mean, you think about the Fae and fairy tales, a lot of it is sort of core European fantasy, folklore, myth and legend. This has that, but it also has other flavors, right?
Right.
Because we wanted some things that are familiar and some things that are sort of WTF moments, right? Like, what did I just read? And so the monks are in there, and I think they're pretty cool, but I'm waiting to see the art. I haven't seen the art yet.
Yeah, that is very cool. Yes, that is true. Yeah, somebody was joking about even their players noticed there weren't a lot of monks in Midgard, but Alexander is correct. Tome of Heroes is going to have plenty of new monk options for all of you that feel
none of which I will allow in my Midgard campaign. Tome of Heroes is a universal book. Anyone can use it, but you don't have to let the monks into your
Yeah, you don't have to let them in. So this is actually, I wonder now, because the Shadow Realm is tied to Midgard, but is not Midgard, correct?
Yeah,
it's like its own plane.
It's its own plane. If you go back to the old D&D cosmology, right, like the plane of shadows was supposed to be between the positive and negative planes, and like the Greyhawk lore about shadow is one way, and then there's all that 4E Shadowfell stuff that does it a different, it's a concept that's been, heck, it goes back to Roger Zelazny, and there's other people who did stuff with shadow. So yeah, it is independent, but it is the way I like to think of it is it's a Lego brick that clicks very neatly onto a Midgard Lego brick.
Yep.
Um, but it could go somewhere else too.
So you think we'll ever get an updated like Shadow Realm interactive map for our Midgard map?
Oh my goodness, that would be so great.
That'd be so cool.
Uh yes.
All right,
and why have I not thought of that before?
We should definitely. I mean, I'm just saying. I love the Midgard map. Also, y'all, let me just hit you with the link in case you didn't know there was a Midgard map.
Right.
It has actually been very, very helpful in weird ways. Like, I've been finishing up a warlock, my first warlock lair for Kobold, which has been very cool. And I needed to know the distance from like point A to point B, because there's some sailing things in it. And so like I was able to like map out some stuff, which was so much easier than trying to do that math in my head.
What blew me away wasn't just you could do a as the crow flies between 2 points, you can do multi-point mapping.
Yes, right? Yes. Like you can map the whole trip for the adventure.
Click here, follow the road over the mountains. Wait, we need to turn around here. Yeah, it's great.
And I know we got a lot of updates to some of the cities for Southlands, and there may be some more updates coming, but yeah, man, it would be
it's cool. Hard to update something that big and complex, but we are in fact planning at least a couple of updates on city maps. And some others. But yes, the map is wonderful and fully functional the way it is. I think a Shadow Realm map, I don't even know how we do it. But now that you've got me thinking about it, I'm going to find a cartographer.
You know what? I almost would want like a layer to turn on to show the shadow roads. Yes. And then you like turn it off and then it shows the Shadow Realm. Because, there's like that idea of like a mirror and like the overlap.
Yes.
Man, that would be so cool.
That would be splendid.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's not part of the project right now.
Well, you know what? Sounds like maybe just another project for another day.
Yeah, or a stretch goal.
Mm-hmm. Hey, it would be a great stretch goal.
Yes.
Great stretch
It's a lot of work for somebody, but I think it would be both fun and worth doing.
So, a ley lines layer. Thank you, Adam, in chat for like a ley lines layer.
Yeah, man, the ley lines are on the Midgard map, but I don't know if you can turn them off as a layer. I don't think you can, but you can search them and
I know. Yeah, I thought you could search them.
Yeah,
that's
you can.
Very cool.
Yes, I'm excited about the maps. I'm excited about the art. I haven't even talked about the Shadow Pantheon at all.
Oh, you don't say.
There is a separate pantheon of gods worshipped out in the Shadow Realm.
Ooh.
And some of them are, a couple of them are familiar. Okay. Because I think they're referenced in Courts of the Shadow Fae, so those guys are around. And some of them are absolutely brand spanking new. What the heck is that? Why is this why is this a local faith? Well, the bear folk thought it was a good idea, or the goblins thought it was a good idea, or
Great.
I'm not even going to talk about the goblin element, but obviously I have fallen in love with these goblins and have written way too much about them. My editor is, like I said, I probably love they're going to be
like, cut the goblins out, Wolfgang.
Hey, the bear folk get so much play. The fae get play. The ghouls, humans too. Humans have a place. Yeah. Haven't talked about the humans either.
Haven't talked about the humans. I actually was wondering about the humans because I know, at least in courts, because there was the system for like your ranking, your status, the status system.
Yes.
Was in play, and I know like if you come in pretty much as anything other than a high elf or a shadow fae, your status is automatically like lower.
Yeah.
But humans are always that weird race. Humans get the whole flat bump, +1 bump, but they're not really considered. They're not shadow fae. They're not cool.
No,
they're not the cool kids in the Shadow Realm, which I think is really interesting because humans tend to be the cool kids everywhere else.
Everywhere else, yeah. No. The Shadow Realm is pretty clear about the status is similar to courts in that, elves and fae and even gnomes do better than humans or bear folk or, well, certainly ghouls don't rate in status terms.
Well, they're
they smell bad. They're undead. Nobody likes them.
Let's see. Yeah, a couple great things coming through here. Any... I don't even know if you can spill this. Are there plans for any kind of expansion for the Northlands or the Eastlands?
Well, that's not this project at all, but we do setting books every now and again. I mean, Southlands has come out, so North and South, yeah, sometimes that happens. Um, but yeah, nothing I want to spill right now.
Well, then looks like you'll have to come back for those beans on another day.
Yeah, those beans, ask me in the new year. I'll have those beans.
Well, that actually leads me to a couple announcements as we wrap up here. So we are going to cons. We mentioned those earlier. But we have some things happening this month here on the channel, including the Vault of Magic one-shot, GM'd by Adam Bradford himself, along with some more familiar faces. We'll be making that announcement here probably in the next week or so about who you can expect to see. But we're going to have a Saturday afternoon one-shot where they're going to be breaking open the Vault of Magic and actually... putting some of these magic items to good use. So that should be a lot of fun. And if you want a little bit of shadowy like storytelling in your life, Courts of the Shadowfae will return for season 2, starting this upcoming Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, with the same cast. So your cast of people really, man, they brought that social intrigue so hard last time. Like really, really hard. So I look forward to this. And I can promise you that before we are done with season 2, I'm going to have some new Ebon Tide content that's been approved by the Kobold crew to actually bring into the story. So you'll get to see some of this in action as well before the Kickstarter is all through. So that should be, a lot of fun. And Southlands is not through. We're still kicking hard on Sunday afternoons with Into the Southlands. So if you just got your Southlands book and you want to come check out some of that into actual play, Noir is doing a fantastic job of just, man, we just went through a Minotaur's Labyrinth and,
oh, yes.
Man, woo boy. It was a mess. We are a mess. We were really not ready for all of that. So, it was a lot of fun. So you should come check that out. And you can always catch, VODs of the past 2 seasons for both of those shows over on the YouTube if you want to get caught up. So go check us out there. And as well as the original conversation you and I had for Kobold Chats around some more of the Shadowfae lore, like if you want deeper lore set in Midgard, you can go grab that as well, which will pair nicely with today's conversation. So don't miss any of that. And for those of you, somebody mentioned the Northlands. I'm simmering on a Northlands show for the holiday season.
Ooh, is Krampus involved? Is there an evil sleigh?
So I actually long ago wrote, I feel like I maybe have said this before. I wrote a one-shot that uses all like Yule lore. Just all Yule lore monsters and creatures, like the Yule lads and the Yule cat and Krampus and Freya and all of the scary things that they thought up to keep children, in line. So yeah, but
terrify the young uns.
Yeah, terrify the young uns. Y'all, there's some really scary stuff. Like one of the witches on the mountain would take bad children and cut them open and stuff them with trash and put them on her front lawn.
Wow.
Right? The Yule cat used to only eat like boys and girls that didn't get new clothes because good boys and girls got new clothes for the Yule season. So if you didn't get new clothes, it means you were bad, and the Yule cat could smell old clothes on you. There's some really messed up. Plus, just the run of the Yule lads, they're like little modus operandi, like spoon licker and pot thief, and like I live for that shit.
Yes, we have talked about this, but I don't think we talked about there being an adventure.
Yeah, I have a written one shot that's kind of like a Yuletide adventure. It's kind of ridiculous, but I quite love it. It's a lot of fun.
Maybe break that out at PAX Unplugged. Then we're into the holidays by then.
Oh, I might have to do that. Oh, okay. But yes, we're looking at, and we've got some new VTTs. We're out on Foundry now. For all you Foundry folk out there. So a lot of new product out on Foundry. Shard, of course, is out there putting out some really cool stuff. And I believe Tome of Heroes is booked for, has a couple things available on Shard right now to play in as well. So, and we may be shaking it out with another VTT that I think is very unique and interesting for our little Northlands game for the holiday season. So keep your eye on that. I can't spoil that yet because I don't have solid plans, but it should be very, very fun.
Cool.
Yeah, it should be very fun.
This is all good stuff. Now I'm excited for the holidays. And as we know, the holidays start with the scary one, which is my favorite.
Yeah, me too.
And
It's the
let's go
spookiest
from there.
season of the year. I'm very excited. Now, before we go, it is important. Tell everybody, when can we expect the Kickstarter to launch? Because it is not launched yet.
It has not launched yet. You can sign up on Kickstarter to be notified the moment it does. So if you go and search Book of Ebon Tides, there's a sign up on Kickstarter and a look at that nice cover art again and a little bit of a hint. We are scrambling to pull together our last bits. I have to make a final chapter turnover, and if I make it this weekend, then we launch next week. But chances are it's later in the month.
Okay.
We're saying in October is what we're saying.
Okay, so before a spoopy month is out, you'll be able to access the Kickstarter.
This Kickstarter will be out in October and probably sooner rather than later. So, but we want it to launch with everything in place. We generally prefer to launch when we have a full manuscript, all the art, everything squared away, really locked down, so that we don't get in over our heads later, right? Or have a turnover come in late or anything that could trip up the timeline, because we want to deliver on time. And with the way shipping and logistics is right now around the world, let's not borrow trouble. Let's start off on the right foot. So coming soon is still where we're headed.
Coming soon. Okay.
Halloween.
So keep an eye on our social media because, of course, we'll make a big, giant announcement. We do have a newsletter, everybody. It has, my understanding is it got a facelift this week. It's all shiny, or last week. It looks really, really great. So check our newsletter because we keep all of that, those announcements coming to you, weekly or bi-weekly?
It used to be bi-weekly, but we have so much news. For the holidays, we might run closer to 3 or maybe even weekly. Yeah. For a little while. It'll slow down again next year.
Well, you at least get your weekly Kobold news if you hop into the newsletter. We, of course, make announcements here, and we'll be back next week for another Kobold Chats. I've wrangled Celeste to come on and talk about her half, so it looks like we're going to be having a big conversation about monsters and her ideas going into probably more bear folk jokes in chat, no doubt. You don't want to miss those very, very, very funny punny jokes. So make sure you follow that social media, and if you don't follow the Twitch channel, if you do, you'll start getting notifications when we go live, which makes sure that you don't miss a moment of anything that we're talking about here over on Kobold Chats. So buckle up, tune in. We've got tons going on here in October, and make sure you follow. Pick a social media platform so you don't miss when Ebon Tides launches, or you can just hit that link in chat and sign up, and you'll get an email to let you know the moment it has gone live, so that you can help us back it and get this project ready to go and out to the public. All right. Any last thoughts, Commander-in-Chief?
This is a project I've wanted to do for years and years and years. I've been up to my elbows in it, and I keep saying I don't want to spoil stuff, but in my heart of hearts, I want to spoil it all because it's so good. I've been having a blast writing it. I've got great co-authors. The art's fantastic. I think people are going to love it. So yes, check it out.
Yeah.
We're bringing you shadows.
Yeah, I'm very, very excited. All right, everybody, we will see you next week. Same Kobold time, same Kobold channel, and we'll keep talking about the Book of Ebon Tides without spoiling too much, hopefully. We'll see you all next week. Bye, everybody.